Hi everyone, and we're going to focus today on guidance revision for GCSE PE, and we're going to be looking at the 4 different types of guidance. You've got visual, verbal, manual and mechanical guidance. Now you've got to be wary of these sort of exam questions because they do like to ask them as a 9-mark exam question, where they typically will ask you to compare visual by verbal or visual manual or manual mechanical, etc. So you need to know at least 2 of them in detail, and often they're in pairs, so that's be wary of that. You also need to know the advantages, like when you would use that type of guidance, and disadvantages when it's not such a good idea to use that type of guidance. So let's crack into it. Right, visual guidance. There's a lot of information on visual guidance. Comes up a fair bit in the exam questions, so definitely get this one revised. So, what is visual guidance? It's quite straightforward. It's showing the performer what to do, and then having an example of how you would show the performer what to do. So, like a video of an elite performer. So someone who's better than them is always a good method of visual guidance. Might be showing a replay of the performer themselves during the performance. It could use photos, diagrams, posters, etc. Anything that can visually stimulate an individual, or it could just be observation. So you pull students to the side and then ask them to watch someone else perform the skill. So there are sort of examples of when you would apply, or how you would apply visual guidance. Now, the next bit you've got is the sort of the process, so a demonstration. It's a key word to have in there. If you get the word visual in there, make sure you add the word demonstration into your answer, but you should be demonstrating the perfect model. So it should be how it needs to look if done properly. Now this can provide a mental image of the action. So while you do it, you're trying to help the performer gain an image of what it should look like, and a mental image of that action, and gain an understanding of the skill. Also, an alternative could be like before they do the skill. You could then use it as a correction of errors, so they might replay the video themselves or observe someone else doing it, and therefore correct their errors in their performances. So always a good little thing to do. Benefits and the advantages. So as a general sort of advantage, it saves time. You can use it in large groups of people, visual guidance, so lots of people can watch it at once, and you can pass that information over very quickly to a large group of people. If students are watching their peers and someone who's similar ability to them, that can build confidence and motivation. So you might be watching someone who's the same level as you, and they can perform the skill. That means you feel like you can perform the skill. It is the best method for beginners, but only if the movement pattern is not performed too quickly, and if it is a quick movement, that it is repeated and slowed down, so it allows the beginners to really process that information and not become overloaded with information. The skill performance must be correct, and there is an exam question saying why must the visual guidance be performed correctly? Because the performers will then copy it, and if they're copying the wrong technique, they're going to learn the wrong technique. So it has to be done correctly. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is that the skill that you're demonstrating cannot be too hard, and therefore the performers must be capable of doing that skill. So if you're performing and showing them a skill that's well out of their ability levels, then that will impact their confidence and more likely to reduce their ability to perform it. Now I've got on here this little corner bit that says can be combined with verbal, and often your concluding point, if you're making a 9-mark exam question and your conclusion, it's always worthwhile putting in that the best method of practice is to combine visual and verbal feedback together to get the benefits of both sets of guidance, so visual and verbal guidance together. Right, so if we get onto verbal guidance now, the opposite to visual, and again, like I'm reinforcing that point I've just made, most effective when combined with visual. So that's a concluding point if you've got a 9-mark exam question. Anyway, what is it? We tell the performer what to do, and then example would be an explanation, or expansion point would be to explain the skill or technique, but it could also be things like questioning the performer. It doesn't have to be before the event, it could be during a skill, so you could use it as a more elite level, or in a game scenario where you're providing quick tactical information. It might be moving positions on the pitch or on a court or something like that, where you're giving quick tactical or positional information across. is better for experienced performers, and the reasoning why is that as a beginner, they may not understand what you're trying to convey if you're verbally telling them. Beginners have a shorter attention span, and they might find the level of guidance boring, the type of guidance boring, so they prefer the visual and it's more stimulating method of guidance. Sometimes if the technical language is used, where there is technical language involved with performance and demonstrations, then beginners can misinterpret that information, and this keyword here, key term here, information overload, can be problematic for performance. So getting too much information as a beginner, they're going to make mistakes. It also requires a high level of concentration. So all of these reasons are why it's better for experienced, or not so good for a beginner. Now, beginners also need to see the perfect model to be able to copy it, which is where it comes in well with visual guidance, and it's better to maybe demonstrate something and talk through the key points. So this will be your concluding point, your AO3, sort of on your 9 marker. The other advantages that we haven't really covered yet is that, or disadvantage, sorry, is that the skills are difficult to verbalize in a large space, or in sports halls where it's echoey, in a large environment where someone might not be able to hear what you're saying. It's harder to use. It's harder in large groups as well, because someone might become distracted and you as a coach might not realize that's happening. And some skills are more complicated, and demonstrating is a lot easier than actually explaining what they need to do. And again, that's reasons why it's better suited for an elite level player. Right, now manual and mechanical guidance have less information on them because they come up slightly less often, but it's still an area that is worth the revision. So manual guidance is where you physically manipulate the body of the performer to create the skill. So you're moving the legs of a performer, or you're getting the arm of a performer and you're pushing it into a particular position. So often the exam board have quoted moving the legs in the breaststroke, so they might be on the float in a swimming pool, and then the coach is moving their legs in the action that it takes them to move their body. It could be hand supporting a somersault in trampolines. You might hold their hand and then they grasp it, and then you put your hand on the back and they flip over doing a somersault, and the coach will support that. Or it could be like moving the arm and lifting the tennis racket up, and the coach moving that arm up. So it's where the coach is physically manipulating the body of the performer. And essentially it's good because what you do is you put them in the correct position. You are helping the performer gain a feeling for the movement that they are doing. It improves safety. So if you're doing a somersault and someone wants to try it first time, hand supporting them is safer than just letting someone go off and do it on their own. And these reasons make it good for beginners. So beginners who are more likely not to know what the feeling of the movement is, and it's dangerous, might not have the confidence. It builds up these feelings and the safety and the confidence for a beginner performer. Now, difficulties are, and the disadvantages are, that the performer becomes reliant on that manual guidance, particularly if it's used for too long. And then when you take that guidance away, they become scared to try it by themselves. Sometimes the manual guidance puts the coach in close proximity with the performer, and that can make feelings of uncomfortableness with the performer, and it's not sometimes that efficient in large groups. Like I said earlier, it is very good when you combine it with other forms of guidance. So you can combine it with visual guidance and verbal guidance at the same time. Now, I've just whacked in here a multiple choice exam question, because that sometimes comes up where you've got to identify what type of guidance is happening. So which of these would be manual guidance? And you've got to explain how to position the body in badminton shot, which would be where you can pause the video and have a go at this yourself. Moving the player's arm through the correct motion of the tennis shot, using a float when practicing the swimming stroke, and then using video feedback to show correct technique. Now, each of them has one type of guidance, and it'd be worthwhile revising and adding these definitions to your repertoire. But the one we're looking at for manual guidance is moving a player's arm through the correct motion of a tennis shot. Okay, and then the final one is very similar to manual guidance. This is mechanical guidance. It's very similar, and you see the points are quite repetitive. So definitely revise this area because they cross over quite nicely. So mechanical guidance is where the coach uses a piece of equipment or an aid to try and move the performer or get the performer into the correct technique. So in trampolining, you might have a rig or a harness where you belt the individual up and then you hoist them in the air while they're doing somersaults. Swimming, they use floats, so you could isolate a leg kicking when they're holding their float in as they're swimming. And then you could, another aspect that is easy to do is just to break a skill down, any sort of skill, and isolate particular parts of that skill. So that's sort of why you would use it. Now, again, these are very similar to what I've just talked about of the manual guidance, so I'm not going to repeat them too much, but you put the person in the correct format, you get a feel of the movement, also known as kinesthesis, where you feel how it should go and then you try to replicate that feeling. Increasing safety is very good for beginners for these reasons, and it builds confidence. And again, the disadvantages are very similar, so too reliant if you use it too long and become afraid if you take the support away, which then can impede progress because they don't feel they can do it without that support. It's not the most efficient in large groups because it takes time to put people in and out and so on and so forth with the equipment, and it takes time up. Sometimes performers can be demotivated if they're used for too long because they don't feel they can do the movement without themselves. They don't feel that they are doing the movement themselves, so they don't feel they can do it without the support. So as you can see, there's a lot of crossover between manual and mechanical guidance. So it's a nice one to revise because it could ask you a question on either of the two. Just remember that any of those forms of guidance, and if you've got AO3, your concluding points would be that the best practice is to combine them with other forms of practice rather than just relying on one type of guidance. So I hope that helps, and good luck in your exam.